So it really follows on from what I've said in terms of determining what kind of trader you are to asking the question, well, actually, what kind of trading makes how much money? And how much money can you make? What's a realistic outlook of earnings? And are all these people who claim to be trading so much actually making money? So let's answer all of those questions in this brief lecture. Now, the first thing is everyone's different. The kind of minimum target of income that I set all my students, and it is an absolute minimum. There's nothing stopping you earning more, and I'll show you how you look to earn more. But because I always set them a minimum target, I know there's a goal at least that they can aspire towards, and we know then what we're working towards as well. So let's just look at that minimum target. What I'm looking for is 95 pips per week. Now, I've already described to you what a pip is. And when we go through some of the trading strategies, I'm going to show you how we go about trying to capture and earn these 95 pips in a week. And you'll see that actually 95 is quite a reasonable number of pips or points, think of it like that, to capture. And let's say you're making just $10 for every pip that you make. So if you make, and the question then is, well, okay, wait a minute, how do I make $10 for every pip? Well, of course, that depends on how much money you put into each trade, and we'll break that down. But this is just to give you the end aim that we're looking for. Well, obviously, that would mean you make $950 in a week, okay, and that would be $3,800 in a month. $3,800 in a month. Obviously, that's just simple maths, and that would be $45,600 in a year. Now, for a lot of people, that's not going to be enough. Well, it's very simple. We can increase our bet size, so we're making more than $10 per pip, or we can trade more frequently. There are two obvious things we can do. This gives you the principle of how we can scale this business up. If we wanted to increase it tenfold, you could, for instance, instead of making $10 per pip, look to make you'd bet $100 a pip, or you'd do, instead of 95 pips per week, 950 pips per week by doing more trades. Do you understand how it all breaks down? But what the most important thing to learn here is it's scalable. That's the whole point of what I am telling you here is scalability. In other words, it can grow, it can increase like a good business should. But we start off with a bare minimum to make sure that when we break it down, it's achievable. So in these lectures, my job is to teach you how to get those 95 pips per week, what all that means in terms of how do you know you can bet $10 a pip? What does that exactly mean? Okay, those are the two main things. Do you see how I've simply broken it down? Because after you've got those two, everything else is just multiplication and addition. That's all it is. Okay, so it's 95 per week and $10 per pip. But as I said, we'll see how we can increase those. But that's what we're aiming for. How do we know that actually there's people out there who do far better than this? Well, here's an example of one of the legends in trading, a company called Winton Capital. I'm a big fan of theirs, as you can imagine, and you can see in blue how they have grown from $1,000 that they start off with, growth of $1,000 compared to the S&P 500, so compared to the general market. And you can see that the general market, over the time frame that they're measuring here, albeit only to 2012, is only up $1,383, whereas foreign exchange trading businesses, trend following like these, and we're going to copy some of their strategies, were up 7,000. So they were up about sixfold, 6 times more. So do people make money? Yes, they make a heck of a lot of money. But wait a minute, these are professional funds with lots of staff and everything else. How can we aspire? How can we aspire to do it? How much can we make? That's what we're really concerned about. I just wanted to show you what the professionals do. How can we get closer to the professionals? Well, actually, your profit potential depends on, as I said, the size of your starting capital, because then you don't have to do $10 a pip. You could do $100 a pip. Now, your starting capital is really out of my hands, okay? And it's also about the number of trades you make or the number of signals you follow. If you do 100 trades and you're making $10 per pip on each one, obviously there's greater potential. So we'll break that down and we'll look at how we actually do all that. We'll break it down and look at how we do all of that in a moment. Now, you've got to also remember past performance, the old saying, is not a guarantee of future performance either. So we've got to be a bit careful about just extrapolating things forward. A typical winning trade, and people often ask me this, produces very often over 100% return on trade. Now, it's not going to be every trade, and you're going to see in a moment, I'm going to show you a professional fund and how much they make per trade, and you'll see in a second that actually the vast majority of trades make a little or lose a little, but a few you make over 100% return on your money that you've staked in that particular trade. Okay. Also, how much can you make? Well, it depends on the discipline to follow all the rules that I'm going to show you, the trading strategy. Because, of course, if you don't follow the rules, it's a little bit like dieting. You're not going to get the end results. Okay? In one sense, is it easy? Well, yeah, in a sense, it's easy because you're following rules. But don't quit your day job. Don't start dreaming that you're going to be working from a field or on a beach somewhere in the middle of the ocean just yet. There's a lot of hard work we've got to do before that. But we know what the goals are. We know what everyone's after when they're trading. So what are the sources of trading profit? These are the things we're going to go through in the lectures. Of course, it depends on the number of winning trades you have compared to losing trades. So we've got to make sure we maximize the number of winning trades. It depends on the discipline to follow the trading rules. It follows on the ability that when you've got a winning trade, you don't just get out of it quickly for fear of it turning into a losing trade, that you know how professional traders milk profits to maximize them. It also depends on your ability that when you've got a loss, you don't just sit on it and watch it become bigger and bigger and bigger, that you know and you learn how to cut losses like a professional. I'll teach you that. It also depends on the amount of starting capital that you have. And as I said, the number of trades that you place. So let's break some of this down and look at what do top traders do? What do some of the world's leading top traders do? And kind of returns they generate. So this is from I'm going to show you a chart and build up to it from one of the world's leading foreign exchange traders, a chap called Bill Lipschutz, former global head of foreign exchange at Salomon Brothers, a friend of mine. He was in my first book, The Mind of a Trader. And let me break down his performance. But first of all, let me just, before I show you that, put it in this context. I'm going to fill up this chart. And this chart is on this horizontal axis. It gives you the percentage loss on any given month. So whether they lost between 0 to 1% or 1 to 2% or 2 to 3%, 3 to 4%, and so on in a month. Did they lose 10% of all their capital? So imagine they had 10 million, and they have far more than that, but let's say they had 10 million. If they lost 10% in a month, then they lost $1 million. Okay? And then the number of months in which any one of these losses occurred. So how many months did they lose between 0 to 1% of their overall capital, and so on? So let's fill this chart up. Okay, let's fill this up. And these were the actual results that they generated over more than a decade's worth of trading. These are just the losses. I'll show you the wins in a second. The number of, and don't forget, this is one of the world's leading traders. Now you might say, wait a minute, Alfred, that's a hell of a lot of losing months. And yet they're one of the world's best. Yes, isn't that great news for us? You can have a lot of losses, but as long as they're kept small, so that on any given month, and they had 40 months where they lost between 1 to 2%. They had over 40 months where they lost between 0 to 1%. So they had 80 months where they lost, over 80 months where they lost between 0 to 1% or 1 to 2%. Okay, in a month. So if they had, as I said, 10 million under management, they lost between 100,000 to 200,000, between 0 to 200,000, between 0 to 2% in over 80 of those months. And you see that they didn't have very many months where they had, say, 5 to 6% losses or 4 to 5. They had no months where they lost more than 6% in a month. What we're going to learn is how do we make sure we don't ever have any big losing months? We don't have any months where we lose. Now, you might say, Alpesh, I don't want any months where I lose. Well, trust me, given that this is one of the world's leading traders, and I can tell you from all the best traders, there will be months when we lose, but the trick is to make sure we never lose much. We turn not losing a lot into a success. That means we're winning. Because if you look at this part of the chart, and this is where we make all our gains, look at the number of months where they gain between 0 to 1%, or 1 to 2, or 3 to 4. And here's the important thing. Look at the number of months where they make more than 6%. There's quite a few. There's quite a few months where they even make around 10 to 20%. They have lots of small gains, I grant you, but a few big wins. That's where they make the money. They allow for some big wins. They run their profits, in other words, and they don't have many months. Let's put it all into one chart. They don't have many months where they've lost a lot. So I've got to show you, when we unravel this in our trading strategies, how do we make sure we don't lose a lot? Never have any big losing months, but we have lots of months where we have some big wins, and overall, therefore, we're better than or as good as some of the world's leading traders. Our strategies, when you break them down, actually help you achieve this. Our strategies that I'm going to show you will actually derive this kind of return. And if you're wondering, well, okay, how good is this kind of return? Well, you'll see this. So you saw the chart that I just showed you, growth of $1,000 investment over from 1991 to 2013. That's a heck of a long time, I know, but they turned $1,000 into nearly $15,000. That's a heck of a lot better than the stock market. $1,000 into $15,000. Now you might say, well, Alpesh, I'm not going to take 22 years over which I do that. I want to do that a lot sooner. Of course you do. I'm just showing you that the strategies that we're going to be adopting work over very long periods of time. They generate great returns for us over those periods of time, as long as we have the discipline to follow them. And of course, as long as we do indeed follow all those rules. Absolutely vital, absolutely important. That being the case, the issue then is, let's just wrap that up again to just overview all of what I've just said there. What do top traders do right? What we're going to do right? They might well have lots of losses, which is good news for us, because it means if they do, we don't have a problem with lots of losses, but their losses, they are small. Probably 4 out of 10 trades for some of them are small losses. They have lots of small gains. Maybe again, 4 out of 10 trades are small gains. Lots of small gains. They have a few big wins, and that's 2 out of 10. What we're going to try and do is do the same. We're going to replicate this kind of success because it's what the success that some of the best traders in the world have. And actually, we're going to try and improve upon it because, as I mentioned in a previous lecture, from a David and Goliath perspective, there are certain advantages we have of being small, which means we should actually do better than them because we don't have the big banks trying to trip us up because they don't even see us. We're too small to be on their radar. And we're going to make advantage of that. Now, if you want to say, well, okay, that's some of the top traders. What about regular people? Well, these are the kinds of trades that we typically do. Okay, it's where, and this is just a 4-hour chart. Each one of these bars represents 4 hours, and you can see that it was entered and exited where the X arrow is and entered where the up arrow is, and it was over 11 days. It was 125 points over 11 days that were captured on just one trade at $25 a pip, and that generated $3,175 profit over 11 days. These are the kinds of trades we're going to do. I'm going to show you lots of examples of these. I'm going to show you the strategies that help you get into them and get out of them, because that's important. So don't worry, I'm going to break everything down in all the lectures, stage by stage by stage, so you understand it all. But the beauty here is you can see that we as regular people, not just big hedge fund managers, can replicate what they do because we have the technologies in order to do it.